Welcome to A Table in a Tavern, your community RPG podcast. Every episode, we'll explore the depths of immersive storytelling, character creation, and mechanics that make TTRPGs so captivating. Whether you're a dungeon master, a player, or just a curious listener, there's a seat for you at our table. So grab your ale, pull up a chair, and let's embark on this journey together. Welcome to the Tavern. Hello and welcome back once again. I am GM Keegan, and of course next to me we have DM Nunn. Across the table, longtime veteran GM Malfane. Today we're going to discuss and focus on, is fairness fun? And I think the first thing we should do is kind of nail down is, should fun even be the goal? And is fairness the best way to get there? What do you think, Knock?
Is fun the goal? Yes. All right. So if we're not having fun, what are we doing? But to tie in fairness, yeah, I think there's a level of, I don't want to call it balance, but I guess for lack of a better word, there's a level of balance you got to have with fairness with all of your players, right? We're not entertaining just one person, two people. Usually it's a full table. You got anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 6. I've had a table full of 8 people, and it was daunting and not fun for me, but they had fun. So when we're looking at fairness on that scale, I think that people, at least in my experience, tend to lean towards the absurd more than fairness. They want to feel that they are the heroes, the top dogs, the champions, if you will. They are better than average. They want to overcome the obstacles that the city guard can't do. But when you're talking about fairness from player to player, I think that gets shady, right? Like, how do you target that? How do you facilitate that? I don't know. Help me out.
Malfane, what's your opinion on this fairness debate or debacle or confusion that Knock is having?
I'm going to say something wild on this topic, and I'm going to say I don't give a crap about fun. In my average games, fun isn't the goal. That might sound worse than it is.
It sounds terrible.
Fun to me
terrible.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. Watch a movie that is just devastating and sad and tragic, and you walk away in tears. And if you ever turned around and said, oh, that movie was fun, you come across as a psychopath, right? It's not fun, but yet you might still say that was an amazing movie. And so what is it that you enjoyed about it? It clearly wasn't fun, right? You were in tears in the aftermath. And it was that it was meaningful. It meant something to you. It managed to captivate you and get an emotional rise out of it. And I think the fairness angle is necessary for that. Because if the players feel like their characters could die at any moment, the story could end at any moment, for some random reason that didn't even make sense, not their fault, and they couldn't do anything about it, they divest from the game. They take a more lackadaisical attitude towards it because they don't want to feel like that loss when it wasn't even their fault. And so if you're trying to generate a sense of meaningfulness where they actually give a damn about what's happening here, the story, the narrative, the characters, their fates, if you want them to give a damn, you want them to feel like they have some control over that fate, right? They have some say in it, and it's not just random stuff happening to them on a GM's whim. There's some sort of thing they could have done to prevent it or to accomplish it, and it's gonna succeed or fail by their merits, and not some random stuff. So yeah.
Okay, so like, as absurd as say is fun even the goal, it is an absurd thing because usually when we talk about RPGs. We say this is our entertainment. We want to sit down and enjoy ourselves. It doesn't necessarily mean fun. We kind of use that as a universal term sometime. But getting down to really what's behind that term and breaking it into other aspects, I think kind of enriches the overall experience at the table. Because the tragedy that Malfane you spoke of, people have had similar experiences at tables where it was quiet afterwards. It was a deep dramatic moment, and then when it ended, everybody was silent because it was heavy. Now, did they enjoy themselves and was it satisfying in some regard? Yeah, because they kept talking about it for weeks and months later. That something devastating happened. They didn't say that was the most fun they had, but it was definitely one of the most impactful moments they had, because they got to experience an emotional, meaningful moment. But we're not talking about just is fun the goal. We're talking about fairness and how should it be used. And elements of fairness could enhance the experience, such as balance. We talk about balance. Does balance equal fairness, or does fairness equate to something different? Is there something more that should be there? Just balance, or how else should we look at this term fairness?
So if we're looking at mechanics, right, we want to make sure that, I mean, we have to kind of break it down a little bit, right? Because I think that fairness, it should be paramount in some ways, but maybe lacks in others. So if we're looking at mechanics, we have kind of talked about this before on another podcast or on another episode, and it was you have to be fair to everybody. You have to have that same rule. If you're going to fudge something for someone, you have to fudge that for everybody.
Okay. So treating players fairly,
right,
sure.
Yeah. So if we're looking at mechanics, yes. Does that equate to fun? I think it does, because in that example, you are creating the game atmosphere, the mechanical atmosphere of it, to be something that everyone agrees to and everyone enjoys. Now, if we flip the coin over to the other side, and we're talking about fairness between players, I don't know what to call this, maybe meta, like giving player A time to shine at the table, and maybe designing an adventure that's heavily towards their character. But if we don't do that to everyone else and they feel left out, does that lower the fun for the other players?
That might be a different way of looking at it. But if they just don't know that you're treating them differently, and even should you even treat everybody the same? And I don't mean mechanically of with your attack, you roll a d6, but with your attack, you roll a d8 because I like you more. I don't mean that kind of fairness, right? We definitely adhere to whatever the rules of the system are. But do you even treat everybody equally, as in spotlight time? Spotlight time even on a grander adventure, or have more connections with NPCs? Or is that something from the player side? So in this instance, fairness isn't involved. It's just their interaction with the world. They get to decide. We as the GMs are not bringing a sense of fairness. That's just how they react to what's going on around them. Like when do we bring the fairness in outside of? Yeah, go on.
It depends on what aspect. So what Nock was talking about in terms of the balance of like, I'm going to let you get away with making this check to jump this chasm. But when the other guy tries, nah, it's not that check for you, buddy. You're going to have a different rule applied to you. That obviously creates a kind of, I imagine it doesn't create fun to have that fairness, but it diminishes fun not to have it. Right, like, so people get jealous, they get angry, they get annoyed that the GM's giving favorable treatment to one of the players.
True, but I would like to ask one thing to that. Hold on, I'd like to ask one thing to that. Is that's true, but what if it's more dramatic in that moment to kind of break the rules for that one player and not another? Would that still be fair because you're trying to create a dramatic moment for that player?
I can imagine for some players they would let that slide if they understand that this is what it is and that's why you're doing it. And if the shoe were on the other foot, if they were having a dramatic moment, you would be doing the same for them, right? That's still consistent, but it's not by virtue of like strict adherence to the rules. It's more of like a narrative consistency. It's a dramatic moment, so you get some leeway, right? Okay. And that would be, so it's not favorable treatment in that sense. It's just a meta rule that isn't in the rule book of just GM fiat of like, if you're having a dramatic moment, I'm going to give you some leeway and some grace with the rules, right? To have your moment. As long as you apply that consistently to all the players having their moments, which brings us to the next point that you brought up about spotlighting players and is that your responsibility? I don't necessarily think that it is your responsibility as a GM to spotlight them, but it is your responsibility to give them opportunities to find a spotlight to shine, right? So players cannot create their own opportunities necessarily, depending on the kind of game you're. And so, therefore, it falls on you to provide them those opportunities, but then it falls on them to take it or leave it, right? So, if a player maybe doesn't like the spotlight, maybe they're shy, they don't want it as much, right? Don't force them. Don't force them into this. Now, no, you must speak now. You must be the main character for this little arc. that doesn't seem to me like the good strat. But give them opportunities, let them choose whether they want the spotlight or not. I think that does fall in many games. That does fall on the GM to do that.
Okay, I see. So would that just be another aspect of fairness? Like we're trying to give everybody equal opportunity to expand their experience? I guess that's one way of looking at it.
I don't know if it's perceived as fairness by most people in that way. It can be, I suppose. It can also be like you're stifling. If a player feels like their character does never get a moment to shine, their story's neglected, they don't have a character arc, and everyone else does, and they desperately want one. I imagine, again, it can diminish their enjoyment of the game because the GM seems to be unfairly targeting them or leaving them out or something. But in terms of like, does this on its own generate its own kind of fun? I don't know. It depends on how you spotlight them, I suppose. Because some GMs do like whole character arcs. We're going to do the next 3-4 sessions is going to be about this character and their personal story or some background story of theirs that we're resolving, right? Sometimes they do that. And that is very hardcore spotlighting a character in their backstory.
Okay. We're giving people opportunity. I think it's always like a GM responsibility since we're running the entire world of sorts. For you, Nock, how do you, I guess, implement fairness in your game? Or is that something that just kind of happens naturally and it's not a forefront or a main concern of yours when you're DMing?
No, I consider fairness. I mean, I do have the rule of the dice don't die. Jeez, oh Pete, am I having a stroke right now?
Oh no, we must check him. Is he okay?
Wow. Okay, no, the dice don't lie. They are the end all be all. So if it comes down to like a hey, this is an epic moment, a make or break, you might die. Here you go. I tend to make those rules more public and put a big shine on them. Again, in fairness, transparency, I don't know, maybe two different things here, but
interesting. That transparency is an aspect of fairness, or is maybe your transparency just results in fairness?
Depends on who you ask, really, right?
I'm asking.
I mean, some people really care about that, and they think, oh, well, you're fudging things. Well, I got to see your stuff, but it's the other side of the DM screen too, right? Because how many times have we seen players? They roll a dice and then quickly scoop it up and then tell you a number that seems abnormally high all the time. So we've all seen that too. Oof. So fairness. Well, you know what? Actually, that cool. I just broke open a whole nother can of worms with that. So when you are playing or you see other players do something like that, that lowers the fun every single time to all the other players. When they see that they're getting away with like fudging their own dice, making fake rolls, other players do not like that. When they find that, they don't like it. So that'll actually lower the fun and in the sake of fairness.
I will say is one of the times, the few times that I've been a player, and I saw another player do that. I looked at the player and he noticed that I saw him, and all I could think was, "You're just having a miserable day because what are you doing? What could possibly go through your mind since the rest of us are all just playing this game, doing everything?
They want to be the hero."
And they weren't even. That's what I was like. I honestly, it was a moment of pity. I felt sadness for this person. Like they were pushed to a moment. And this is a side thing. I know we're talking about fairness, but it was pushed to the moment where they're like, I need to just keep lying to make my character seem better than they are. And it wasn't even a serious life or death moment. And I talked to the GM afterwards, and he was like, yeah, that guy always has a problem. I was like, okay, as long as you know, I'm out of this table. It was a bizarro universe moment for me.
Yeah, so going back to your original question, I do try to keep the fairness with everybody. Everyone gets their turn, and it's not in a way to cater to the crybabies or the Karens or anything like that. It's just, to me, I am trying to tell that story for all of them involved. And I don't know if I was in their position, which I'm not because I'm never a player because I'm a forever DM.
Yes,
but
true.
but if I was in their position, I would want my time to shine as well. So I guess that's just how I look at it. Yeah.
Well, it's good to see that you're not bothered by being a forever GM, and you approach everything, from a certain aspect of, your adventure style, very classic, and
Oh God.
as you don't groan in the background of being forever GM. Mal, do you find these similarities? Because we've talked in other episodes and off camera, so to speak, that you don't have the same style necessarily as Knock. But do you come across these same kind of issues, or is fairness just like a different view, or do you have like a different angle?
I actually suspect that is kind of universal. It's just the way fairness is dulled out is probably different. But in terms of like, I don't think of fairness as a means to generate fun. It's something you need to not detract from it, right? Like to me, fairness is something. It's a baseline. Yeah. You need to have it. It doesn't do anything. But it's a necessary thing, but it doesn't actually elevate anything. Like more fairness equals more fun. It's fairness is a static. Either it's fair or it's not, right? And so the way I think of fairness, where it's most impactful to my mind, is in every which way that the players have agency over what happens to them. That's the kind of fairness I think is the most impactful, and I pay them because it's very easily upset. That balance is very easily upset. And so that one is the most difficult thing to manage, I think. So that's why I pay more attention to it. The other stuff of just be consistent with how you apply the rules, be consistent in how you give opportunities to players. That part is relatively simple. As long as you do it, everything's fine and dandy. But the balancing of the game of like giving players enough agency to determine their own fates and not blindside them with some like, what this roll will determine whether you live or die, and it's like a 50-50 shot, and you have to do it because this is how I designed the adventure. That's probably not a good design for an adventure, right? Like you have to jump this chasm now or die, right? I imagine those kinds of things is going to be detrimental, and so making sure you avoid those like unfair deaths or like random chance deaths that have very little input from the players or decisions from them resulting in this. That causes them to divest from the game, like in terms of care about it, right? Just to avoid the pain of loss, of failure, or whatever.
See, that's a good point. That's a good point. That fairness may not equal fun in one degree, but it definitely adds to the overall enjoyment and I don't want to call it
investment.
I was gonna say serious. I wasn't correct, but I think investment. I think it definitely leads more towards investment, which ultimately can be a very fun thing. But I think investment is what it really, really facilitates, and that's a goal I think every GM wants: more player investment.
And that's the more difficult objective to hit because you do that during the design phase of your adventures or your boss battles or whatever it is. You have to have that foresight of realizing, like, am I putting them in a situation where it's just going to be up to the dice gods whether they live or not? Or am I putting them in a situation where it's up to them and their clever use of their abilities or whatever that makes or breaks or stacks the deck in their favor or against them? And I think that part is more difficult to manage as a GM. Just being consistent is relatively easy. Giving people opportunities is relatively easy, but designing adventures that are truly fair and seem to be like, so the players, especially, it has to seem fair that way, because then they'll invest in the game more. They won't feel like the GM will just kill them on a whim or due to some poor design. And so I think that part you need to nail down, and it's not that easy.
I think that's where a lot of us agree. Knock and I were even talking about that. I think treating players differently is fair, because I think ultimately we should be working towards the opposite, not cheating them or robbing them of something, but does not necessarily mean that we treat them all the same. And you may think, well, that's a terrible idea. What do you mean we don't treat them all the same? Because what if one person is finding a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment of they're just not as, let's say that they don't have a lot of strong social skills. They're not very proactive in that way, but they just love following the group and interacting on an interpersonal level. That's fine. But forcing everybody to have the same experience, I think, would be a lack of fairness, because you're not taking their own makeup into account. So even when we force the wallflower to talk, you don't want to do that all the time, because then we're just kind of robbing them of something. I think that the fairness is almost like a check and balance for us as GMs of, are we robbing them of it? Not necessarily are we producing fairness, but are we robbing them of something? And when we do,
Well,
yeah, go on.
you can think of this as a privilege on our end, because if you think about you design a video game or you make a movie or something, you don't know who your target audience is. So it's just a large mass of people, and it's like ages 22, something like that. But as GMs, when we're designing stuff, we know our players. We know who they are. We know what they like. We can get to know them personally, and then we can tailor make stuff to know what that'll suit their taste. So I think that's what you're speaking to, of like different players have different tastes, different preferences. Even different characters have different kinds of story arcs that are suitable to their character, right? So you don't give them the same opportunities, obviously. The rogue probably needs a stealth mission or something that's appropriate for a rogue or whatever, right? That lets him shine and be the badass. And the warrior has a duel or something at sundown or whatever it is, right? Like, so you do tailor it to the characters, you tailor it to your players, and you have that privilege because you know exactly who your target audience is.
Yeah, knowing the people at your table is going to be the first step, and honestly the most important step of any aspect of fairness. And we've talked about the meta side of it. We've talked about players having fairness with other players, the mechanics side of it, and it even bleeds into the rewards of it too. And again, this goes towards what Mal just said with knowing the players, because I've got players at my table that care more about wealth. Rather, it's they want all the gold, right? I've got some characters that just, they don't care about any of that stuff. They just want gear, magic items. They want something interesting that their character can do. I have some people that totally love just the reward of being able to walk out alive. And
That's scary.
You guys are laughing at that, but I play in a, like, yeah, anyway. So I have players that are all over the board with that. And I think when you're looking at fairness and you're looking at rewards for fairness, it's not going to translate as on a 1-to-1, right? Player A and player B want totally different rewards, but in all fairness, I'm targeting each of them with what they like, right? So that's where the fair comes in. Some people are going to look at it as, oh man, this guy just got a power bump because he got a +1 weapon, and all I got was some boots that make me climb walls. Even though those are pretty freaking awesome boots, they don't see it that way. So, wow, I'm about to drop a bomb, guys. Here it is. Fairness is perception of what's being given, and everybody has their own perception. So nobody can win.
And on that note, I think we're going to give Malfane the final thoughts and wrap this all up.
Oh, dear Lord, I'm not ready for this. There's too much pressure.
I was trying to be fair and equitable about this whole situation. So.
Well, that's not what I wanted, Keegan. You didn't tailor it to me, all right?
I failed
know
at my
your
fairness. And took away and robbed you of your fun.
Yeah, that's unfair. Nock gets to speak when he wants to. I get to speak when you dictate it. Why is this fair? How is this fair?
Because you love the sound of your voice. I was just trying to be kind.
Well, I mean, you know me a little bit, I guess. All right. Well, I mean, ultimately, I think fairness comes in many different forms, especially when it comes to giving your players what they want. That's what you guys have been talking about. Like, there's going to be a different formula for each player and their characters too. And so what benefits them, what best spotlights them, what best aids in their fun and increases their enjoyment, which rewards they appreciate, and so on and so forth. I still think the aspect of fairness that is the most difficult to master for a GM is going to be the design part, because that requires forethought. So if there's an aspect of fairness that I would expect to see GMs failing at, it would be that one. Because it requires that foresight, and that usually comes with experience. I don't know if there's a shortcut to it. But yeah, I imagine that's the hardest part. The rest of it, you can work out. People have good intuitions.
Excellent.
People have good intuition.
Some people. Yeah, some people. I should qualify that.
Thank you once again for joining us. I am GM Keegan. Next to me, we have DM Knock, and across the table, joining us is the veteran GM, Malfane. Have a good night.
I just want to play a game.
Thank you, community, for listening. Join RollNet's Discord now to continue the discussion with other GMs, DMs, and players about tonight's topic. Come back next time, where there's always a seat waiting for you at a table in a tavern.
I just want to play a game.